So my name is Count Seto from the Mid-Realm. My name is Spencer Waddell. I was born and raised in Belleville, Illinois. I'm a veteran of the United States Air Force. I was an aerospace engineer. I worked on aircraft, so it was fun. I'm currently going to school for kinesiology, and I work part-time as a personal trainer. So as I said in the SCA, I'm from the Mid-Realm. I'm a Knight of the Society. I was the 100th king or 100th reign of the Mid-Realm, right before, or right BC as I call it, before COVID. Our reign ended during that, so we handed the reins over to their now majesties, Felix and Madalena, who are now reigning awesome, and they're doing a great job. And it's like, whew, all right, now we get to sit here and do classes and fun things like that. So I've been in the society for since 2009, a little past 11 years. I've always loved martial arts from the age of a little boy. I started off doing Aikido. I started doing some Hapkido, and then I just started picking up different martial arts as I went. So I've always loved the Japanese culture. However, my knight, Sir Rodrigo Vargas de Leon, had a story, or for all of his squires and dependents, he's like, write a 2-page paper of how you would come into my service. So we have him to blame or thank for my learning of Yasuke, the African samurai. So this is what sparked me to drive down that rabbit hole that is what Yasuke is. And in 2009 and 2010, there wasn't a lot of research on Yasuke. So good old Google, I typed in African samurai or Black samurai, and you'd find little bits and pieces here and there, but I could never find the full story to put it together. And in the SCA, I love the SCA, how you can be whoever you want to be. You can portray whoever you want to portray. All walks of the world, all walks of history. However, myself, I wanted to portray somebody that maybe could have been one of my ancestors. And after doing a DNA test recently in the past 6 months for my friend Baroness Emikin helped me do that. I found out that I actually have some Kenyan heritage as well as some Nigerian heritage. So it's almost right around the area where Yasuke was supposedly from. We're not exactly sure. So anyway, I wanted to thank you for allowing me to talk, and hopefully you guys learned some interesting tidbits about Yasuke the African Samurai. So let's dig in. The first part, let me build a story and also kind of set what is happening in Japan at this time. So for that, we talk about the age of the warring states, or the Sengoku Jidai, the warring states. This is a period in Japanese history that was nearly in constant civil war, social upheaval, and political intrigue. It was from 1467 all the way to 1615. So right around the edge of our game, even though our game has now gone to around 1615, people keep on stretching a little bit farther, but it's right around that time period. The Sengoku period was initiated by the Onin War in 1467, which collapsed the feudal system of Japan. This fought for control over Japan and was a power vacuum. So while the Iko Ikki emerged to fight the samurai rule, there was the arrival of the Europeans in 1543, which was one of the first times when the Europeans first came through. Also, the Japanese warfare, and Japanese ended its status as a state of China also in 1549. Oda Nobunaga dissolved the Ashikaga shogunate, which was in 1573. This launched a war and political unification by force, including the Ishiyama Hojan and the Ji War. Until his death in the Honju incident in 1582, Nobunaga's successor, Toyotomo Hideyoshi, completed his campaign and therefore reformed what we know as Japan and started to bring everything together, one of the great unifiers of Japan. Hideyoshi also launched Japanese invasions in Korea in 1952, and their eventual failure damaged his prestige before his death in 1598. Tokugawa Ieyasu displaced Hideyoshi's young son and successor, Totomio Hideyoshi, in the Battle of Sekigahara, which everyone talks about. That's the battle where Musashi was supposedly there and everything happened. We're not exactly sure if Musashi was there or not, but that was the Battle of Sekigahara. And he reestablished the feudal system, which is the Tokugawa shogunate. The Sengoku period ended when Toyotomo loyalists were defeated in the siege of Osaka in 1615. I know this is a whole lot of information for us, but we're trying to get it where Yasuke falls into. So the Sengoku period was named by the Japanese historians, otherwise the Warring States, which is different from the Warring States in China, or also a Warring States period that was in like 400 something. There's a lot of Warring States that happens, so you're trying to keep it simple, but organized. Modern Japan still to this day recognizes Nobunaga, Hideyoshi, and Ieyasu as three great unifiers and the restoration of their central government in the country. So that's the first part of something a little bit of our foundation. The last bit of foundation we want to do is to talk briefly about the Jesuits. In the Society of Jesus, the religious order known as the Catholic Church, headed in Rome, was founded by Ignatius of Loyola, the six companions of his approval of Pope Paul III in 1540. These members were called the Jesuits. They had their ministries in up to 112 different nations. The Jesuits worked in education, research, and cultural pursuits. Jesuits were also given retreats, ministers of official parishes, as well as different work they tried to educate people in their religions. Now, where this comes important is that they had a mission, and they called it the Formula Institute of the Society, where first the Jesuits concentrated their few key activities. First, they founded schools through Europe. The Jesuits then taught and trained both classical studies and theology, and their schools reflected in this. Second, they went sent missionaries across the globe, and they first started to evangelize the whole known world at this time. So they went to places such as Paraguay, Japan, that's the important one for this story, Ontario, and Ethiopia. This formed a purpose. They aimed to stop the Protestant from spreading and preserve communication in Rome, the successor of St. Peter. But that's something for another story if we talk about the religious pursuits of some things in history. So this there starts the story of Yasuke. When I, once again, was looking for my research, I had to find bits and pieces from all over the internet. However, I think it's about 3 years back, Thomas Lockley, the author of The African Samurai, and the story, or his book, The True Story of Yasuke, the Legendary Black Warrior of Feudal Japan. I was lucky enough that I had a chance to, segue. I was lucky enough that I learned through the SCA or doing all these things. I don't know if it's just becoming who you want to be in the SCA or trying to become who you want to be as a person. I just started asking questions because people are scared to ask questions, but the worst they can do is say no. And once you get over the fear of hearing no, it opens up so many doors for you. So I got on the internet, typed in the email, and I typed in Thomas Lockley and sent him an email. I'm like, hey, I'm doing this research on Yasuke the African Samurai. I want to go and actually study and travel and go through his footprints and figure out all the places he went and record it one of these days. But then COVID struck. But anyway, he wrote back to me and he said, that sounds awesome. I really wish you the best in that. And maybe if you want to talk about this, that'd be great. We can set up a Zoom call. So I got to talk to the author of this book. And he writes me back and forth all this time. He'll be like, oh, that's really interesting. You might want to try to do this and this there. So this is for the sake of our story or our teachings here. I'm going to use his book as kind of a footnote, or especially talk about religious wise, what kind of Bible that I'm going to use to kind of help me find Yasuke throughout this. So I'm going to have a source notes and references at the end, and you can see all the research that I did. And this book is a nice, even though they did their own research too, Thomas Lockley is a professor that actually studies and teaches. He's British, I believe, or European descent, but he teaches in Japan. They put together this compilation of 8 years worth of research to write this book, even though then they turned it into more of a kind of, this is probably what we thought would happen, and they kind of made it spicy just to add some things to it, but still, it's still rooted in history. So talking about Yasuke's journey, he actually got to Japan in it was 1578. So this is right towards almost the end of the formula where we talked about the warring state, the warring period. He was only in Japan for about 4 years, yet he made all these things happen. The Jesuits did write it all down too. They write down the things, but then it's interesting how history too. I was watching Lisa and Joseph. She's saying that to me, that it's funny what things get lost in history, and then it's funny to see what things get kept, and then you try to put it together like a puzzle pieces, and that's the interesting part. So Yasuke was only in Japan for around 4 years, and he made such an impact that they even made children's books and all these things about it. We're going to follow his footprints, and when we think about this, I'm going to share pictures just real quick so you can see where on the map he was at, and then we'll get back to that. So sharing screen 1. So if we look at this, I don't know can you guys see this at all? Let's see a map. Okay, so looking at the map, in Japan, he came in actually in Nagasaki, and he traveled all the way through Nagasaki to the end of Funai, and then went through the inland sea, which is actually named the Seto Inland Sea. I didn't do my name on purpose for that, but I thought it was cool. And then he traveled through Matsuyama, Tamamasu, Kobe, and then all the way into Kyoto within this short period of time. So, and I know we say so like 4 years, Seto, that's a long time. We didn't have cars, planes, any automobiles, anything. That this would have took them such a hard path to actually get there. And we've gone through and found all the parts where they actually went so we could go, since they don't exist anymore. Some of the places just were shrines or all things. So with anything a little bit more, now you have the basic foundation, and I'm gonna read this passage to you from the prologue, the prelude of the book, to kind of give you a thought of Yasuke and where he was. So I'm gonna read this short little excerpt. All right, so this is called the Prelude, Yasuke de Guzaru. June 21st, 1582. Before daybreak, the Honjo temple already glowed brightly, flames engulfed, and its roof and walls as climbing waves of gold and crimson, scattered around the main temple. Another half-dozen small structures crackled and sparkled like the festival bonfires, as thick smoke spread over Kyoto. Deep within the glowing fires, Lord Nobunaga and his small entourage had clustered together to fight it out. They only delayed the inevitable. They were outnumbered, 100 to 1. Surrounded by multiple lines of gunmen and also archers, the only defenses were burning. The gunfire had paused as the traitor, the general Atetsuki, now ordered an advance of his veteran samurai on all sides with smoke, and as the smoke billowed and wielding swords and spears. The vengeful lord would not let the fire complete his retribution. Yasuke emerged from the inferno to face them. He managed to escape out the side of the burning temple. Last within the confusion of the flames and the smoke, he now faced only 3 men in a tightened circle of hundreds. With the blaze raging behind him, he hoped to cut through them quickly, to somehow escape before another 3 or even 30 blocked his escape. The Japanese proverb, gossip about a man and his shadow will appear, proving far too literal for these treacherous Atetsuki soldiers. Frozen before the foreign warrior, they knew Yasuke only from rumors, Nobunaga's black man, the African samurai. In person, they have never before seen a shadow so tall, a man so dark. Nobunaga's bodyguard stood above them like an adult over children, their helmets barely reaching their chests. And half-concealed face was more than dark-skinned. It was freshly smeared with ash and blood from the battle only made him seem more terrifying. Also, perhaps most daunting of all, he clenched a katana in his hand, its blade already lacquered in blood. The 3 warriors had not expected this. They imagined only to vanquish foes, few mortally wounded survivors ready for the final blow, or perhaps a cowering servant fleeing from the blaze. This was no meek servant. Yasuke loomed over them, focused, undaunted, wrathful. One of the soldiers glanced at the sword in his own trembling hand, and his look revealed all. It was not a weapon enough to fell such a man. Yasuke smiled grimly. Fear was much needed ally this night. This would be the last mission for his lord. The cloth bundle that clenched at his hip sat heavily against Yasuke's upper thigh, as if urging him on, onwards, forward. Moments before, he had vowed to carry out Nobunaga's mortal remains into his lord's heir, and he did not journey halfway across the known world to break such vows. The 3 soldiers remained spellbound, unable to move. Even words failed them. Yasuke de Guzaru, the African samurai challenged, stepping forward into attack position. I am Yasuke. So this is the first part of the book. When you open up this book that Thomas Lockley has, and you're like, whoa, this guy seems really cool. Or at least, certainly I did at the time. I'm like, yeah, this is who I want to be in the SCA, or this is what I want to portray. But it was so cool when he put into these words what maybe Yasuke's last moments in Japan were. Now, this is kind of like a movie where we go to that whole thing. The movie starts at the end. So now we're going to go to the beginning. Yasuke's life or origins. Yasuke's origins remain a mystery. Historical resources are scant. While some researchers believe that he was from Mozambique, others suggest Sudan. In the book, they're not really sure. They think he's either from the top left of Africa or the top right horn because he was taken at an early age. During this time, there was used to where people would come, and they talk about the whole slave trade, not to get the nitty gritty part of it. People would take other villages or either through battle, and then they'd trade them because people would trade all the time. Now, however, the ones that were young enough and that could be conformed and changed were then maybe taught. And in such ways, they believe that Yasuke became a mercenary. Now, there's some talk that he probably went through India, he went through all these parts of Japan, but we slowly get ahead of ourselves. Let's go back. So they say he was abducted as his family as a child, either by Arab or Indian slave traders, trafficked through Arab countries and across the Indian Oceans. He likely worked as a slave or trained as a child soldier who fought in the Garat or Goa in India. Before he was hired as a valet by the Jesuit missionaries, thus the Jesuits come into play, from Portugal. At the time, Goa was a prime trading, missionary and military center from Portuguese in India. This is one of the largest centers of African slave trade, where Locke speculates that Yasuke met Alessandro Villanyaho. This name and this person is very important. He was the most powerful Jesuit missionary this day in Asia. He made Yasuke his personal valet and bodyguard. The pair and their entourage arrived in the ship, by ship, in 1579 at the port of Kichiuchi in Nagasaki, as we said before, the southern Japan island of Kyushu, according to Locke. Villanyaho had spent 6 years traveling from Rome via countries such as Portugal, Mozambique, India, Malaya, and Macau. However, he hoped to convert thousands of Japanese to Christianity, but his mission would not be easy. When he arrived in Japan, the country was embroiled in the brutal civil war, which you guys may have heard about, the Sengoku Dai, and it only ended later in 1603. Basically, they saw hundreds of strong men from many states across the country battling for power. It was a semblance that was restored and remained local feudal wards known as daimyo, or in our case, is what the SCA we think about baron and baronesses. They'd be a little bit farther though, but daimyo is pretty much a good way to talk about it. Yet most of them are warlords, sought to unify Japan. Now, Oda Nobunaga became most powerful among them, another name we've talked about before. He controlled Kyoto, which is nowadays, we talk about the center of the capital, Tokyo, because it was Kyoto and then became Tokyo eventually. The dominant center of the country was viewed as Japan's three unifiers, along with Ieyasu, Tokugawa, and Hideyoshi, as we talked about before. At this time, the samurai group of warriors, well-versed in warfare and the arts, formed the ruling class in Japan. 1579. Yasuke arrived in Japan around 1579 in the company of the Italian Jesuit missionary Alessandro Villanyaho, who had been appointed visitor/inspector of the Jesuit missions in East Africa and Southeast Asia. When Yasuke and Alessandro arrived in Kyoto, the sight of a 6'2" tall black man caused a frenzy in the marketplace. The loud commotion caught the attention of Japanese warlord Oda Nobunaga, who was impressed by Yasuke's towering stature. Yasuke was tall and used his military experiences to detect risks as for the Jesuits as they traveled and formed alliances with local warlords, says Thomas Lockley. He trained the militiamen and likely earned new techniques himself, including the Japanese martial arts and sword skills. Such skills would later appeal to Oda Nobunaga, who looked to Yasuke by the conversant talking to him in Japanese, because he learned Japanese as he was there, for news about the wider world. This brings a story that I will talk about briefly. Thomas Lockley talks about it so well, whereas they're getting their way to Kyoto, because Villanyaho is like, we need to talk to Oda Nobunaga so we can spread Christianity to everybody, but we need to take our time to get there. They're going through the marketplace and people just start looking at it. Yasuke, because you gotta imagine these people are maybe no bigger than 4 feet, maybe 5 feet tall. So they're just looking at him like, what's going on? This is crazy. And slowly a frenzy starts getting up and they start like tagging up. They're like gonna rip him apart because they're like, what's going on? There's just a frenzy. It's like a movie star. If someone saw The Rock, the Dwayne Johnson. I don't know if everyone loves The Rock as much as I do, but I do. And I'd be like, oh my gosh, The Rock. He's pretty cool. Or whoever you'd be. So Villain Yaho is saying, just run, don't get torn to pieces. And he runs, they get out of the Jesuit. You can imagine this kind of chase scene. They get to the monastery that's in that town. The doors are coming, they're just slamming on the doors. They're like, let us in, let us in. And Yasuke is just like, oh my gosh, what is going on? And then you hear it go silent. Then you hear horses coming, you hear people getting out of the way. And then you hear this knock, knock at the door. They open it because they're like, oh, what's going on? It's the actual guards of Oda Nobunaga. And this Kyoto is about a days away from this point, but they've now find out where Yasuke was. And they say, we want him. Come, we want to speak to him now. And Villain Yaho couldn't quite tell. Because you can imagine that's like, I'm standing next to a person like me. Oh, I'll be right there. And they're like, no, no, no. We want Yasuke. And he's like, oh, okay, well, I'll see you at Oda Nobunaga's house eventually. So he actually had his guards come and get him and bring him to himself. To where at that point, Yasuke went before Oda Nobunaga and waited patiently until Oda Nobunaga brought him before him. This brings to March 1581, when Yasuke and Alessandro arrived in Kyoto. The sight of the 6'2" tall black man had a frenzy in the marketplace. The loud commotion caught the attention of Nobunaga, and then the daimyo was all too fascinated with his African man's skin that at that time they thought they painted some European black or brown just to be a disguise. They had no idea. They asked him to strip like from the waist, and they tried to scrub him off and to say like, oh wow, you're really not, that's you. They've never seen a lot of people of that color decide. And also when you think into some of the Buddhists as well as other teachings they have, Buddha was supposed to be dark in skin or a godly figure, so they weren't quite sure what was going on. So also in the book, they talk about him, characterizing him as handsome, some who possessed around the strength of 10 men, and recorded in the Lord Nobunaga Chronicles, which is a book that's written in Japan as well, the principal Japanese source that describes Yasuke. Upon seeing Yasuke, that's when he demanded him to strip and to scrub down his clothes, which we talked about, and he wasn't covered with ink. Yasuke, by some, was known as the first African that Lord Nobunaga has ever seen, and he was one of many Africans to come with the Portuguese to Japan in the non-bond trade. He was soon appointed as high-ranking samurai. Now, you wonder where this goes from just here to right away. They depict the story as talking about, because once again, we're not exactly sure what happened. When he had him come to talk to him, he was saying, he was first delighted the fact that this man, this African man, or just any foreigner, knew how to speak Japanese because he taught himself. So he didn't have to have a translator, and he would just talk back and forth to him. Nobunaga was also a man of intrigue. It was interesting because some people call him the demon of the East, because one moment he'd be nice, but if he wanted you or if he wanted to take him away, you were just done. So you always want to keep him happy. So Yasuke wasn't quite sure what to think about him from rumors. And he's like, no, come here, talk to me. He was so excited that he had one of his people bring him a globe of the earth, because there were such things at that time. They weren't super accurate, but he was like, he pointed and he's like, where are you from? And Yasuke wasn't exactly sure, but he pointed to Africa. And they depict this thing where Nobunaga's just looking at this globe, just looking at where Japan is and looking at where Africa is. Looking at Japan is where Africa is. I'm like, wow, you've traveled this far. This is quite interesting. And then he'd shoo him away and be like, that's enough for today. I'll talk to you later. And then he'd wait for him to come back, and eventually he'd come back and talk. So eventually they became great friends. And this is how he got appointed as a high-ranking samurai, because he saw how strong he was. He believed in him and he trusted him through their talks. And even though as the trades of Christianity and the Jesuits worked eventually, Villain Yaho was like, my work here is done. You get to keep Yasuke. Thank you very much. And Yasuke, I can imagine at the time, was like, what? But oh well, I'm happy here. But he knew this would give him good favor. So Villain Yaho was like, there you go. Here you have a good friend there as a bodyguard. So it was very interesting how this transcribed. Yasuke then soon ran to prominence as a high-ranking samurai, where he's appointed to the top position by Oda Nobunaga. He was given his own house, his land, servants, and his very own katana. And they say this was probably in a month's worth of time. So it's very interesting how fast it happened. Given that there are no records on how much Yasuke earned, Locke says it's too hard to know how highly he ranked. He speculates that the African was an equivalent to a page or a bodyguard to Oda Nobunaga. But when we all know in the SCA, we think about pages, squires, like they were like, I don't give my pages or squires or houses. I mean, I certainly don't. My squires would be looking for them. Like, I can afford a house. But this is the richest man in Japan. So if you're one of his underlings, he's like, yeah, I guess you can have a house. You can have these things. So it's not too far-fetched to think. While Yasuke became Japan's most famous known foreign-born warrior this time, Oda Nobunaga, it was short-lived, because then sadly Oda Nobunaga dies in 1582. So 3 years later. It's very short, which we'll go to talk a little bit more. Now, Yasuke was initially viewed, as we said, a source of entertainment. He was novelty, but within a month, he became a valued samurai. So the entourage, and according to sources, Oda Nobunaga just loved to talk. He was allowed to dine with Nobunaga, so that meant something even specifically was great. And they had often talks about the world or the world outside life around them. Because even though he was trying to unify Japan, he also wanted to know about the world. He didn't want Japan to be locked in, as it were. He wanted to actually give Japan some outreach. So he had plans for after he unified Japan, sadly not knowing that he would die, he was going to spread out to the world. So that brings us to June of 1582. In 1582, Yasuke joined Nobunaga's forces in the invasions of the Iga province. The Iga province was famously known for their ninja. So we talk about Iga ninja. They don't talk about it a whole lot in the book, but I think they're there. We'll just find out. According to Locke, Oda attacked the mountain range province and then the ninja hotbed of around 40,000 to 60,000 troops, and conquered it following a failed attempt by his son Nobutatsu in 1579. It was then that Locke said that Yasuke's first military campaign was under this Oda Nobunaga at this time. His second and last campaign was June in 1582, when Oda's samurai general Itachi, the one we talked about, attacked Oda's residence in Kyoto. The attack was triggered and then known by the Battle of Honju Temple, but the end of Nobunaga's plans to consolidate power in Japan. Facing defeat, Oda ended his own life to avoid losing honor, thus committing seppuku, or harakiri, as they'd say. And he performed the ritual, and then sliced in horizontal. His attendant, Ren Mori, lopped off his head. And the legend has it that Oda Nobunaga's last order to Yasuke was to take his sword and his decapitated head to his son, thus the prelude that we read at the beginning. We're not exactly sure what happened because no one really has the stories, but it's a pretty darn good story, so we're going to say it happened. After Oda's death, records of Yasuke became scarcer. The last possible references of him, according to Locke, were in the Jesuit accounts of 1582. According to Gary Leloup, the professor of history in Tufts University, Yasuke is taken prisoner by Oda's enemies, but then later released because he was not Japanese. Because there was this level of, I don't want to say pride or not even bigotry, just they had national pride wise. And when they had this foreigner, he's not even Japanese. He's not, I don't know why he made him a samurai. He's basically an animal. To kill him would give him too much honor. Just let him go. And that's when Yasuke just fades into the past or into history. So we don't know if he became a Ronin and just traveled the countryside doing cool deeds or whatever. Or some speculate that he took a role of bodyguard with other Jesuits and found them again, or he became a sailor or a pirate. Nobody knows. Now, that's the main story of Yasuke, but we still have a lot of things where we talk about his legacy. While Yasuke's existence had gone down in the history books, he was no means the only foreign samurai. At that time in Kyushu, there was a large population of Koreans, Chinese, many Europeans, Indians, Africans who passed through the country. The air presence is documented in handcrafted folding screens of this era, which depict the arrival of large black ships in their life alongside the locals. Such ornate decorated screens belong to the upperclassmen, which produced in the early 1590s, which portrays a wrestling man between a black man and Japanese warrior, which Locke assumes was maybe Yasuke and Oda, because they could do whatever they want. Maybe they just thought it was fun to mess around. Yasuke really comes into the foray when he served Oda, obviously, and we have sources of his life which dictates the deeds and character. Others like him weren't that well documented. We can't bring a picture of them into their lives. Yasuke has been only reimagined through fiction, though. So that's the things now. I don't know if you guys are familiar. They're going to make an anime or some kind of video on Netflix that has to be the Yasuke story. That's supposed to happen sometime. I don't know when. Before the late passing of Chadwick Boseman, he was supposed to play the part. So now we don't know if he's going to recast or what's going on with that. But there's a lot of things where they still stays alive as far as the story. So in 1968, an author, Yoshiro Yuzuru, made a basis of a prize-winning children's book called Kurosuke, and in which recent years has been a Japanese TV historical dramas as well as historical books. And as a debate for multiculturalism and diversity intensifies in the nation, Locke says it is the right time for the Yasuke story to be told again. There is still kind of romance and mystery to the story for those who escaped slavery and was raised in foreign heights next prime ruler Japan, says Lockley. I'm going to share a screen just a little bit so I can show you some other pictures. Then we can open up to questions, as well as I have a short little video that I thought would be interesting to show. But excuse me one moment. As share screen one. There we go. So we saw this picture as we had before. The book, The African Samurai, so I can bring it up a little bit bigger. They have the depiction, that's as big as I can get right now. Thomas Lockley and Geoffrey Gerard in The African Samurai, the true story of the book. So that's pretty cool. They have a piece of artwork, the statue, and it was just recently that my friend from Ethelmark recently spoke out to me. His name's Sir Merrick, and when I'd go to their camp at Penzic, he had a few kids, and I'd tell them about their story, and I'd tell them about my persona. And it was just like, literally, I kid you not, a week ago, they're like, oh, my son and or my children saw this statue somewhere, and they thought immediately of you. You had a pretty good impact on them. And I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. Because I'm like, I'm glad they learned something. And I'm glad they didn't think I was a jerk. But it's really cool to show stories and also share things with people. This is the artist herself right there. She's with all these other works that she had. A little close-up of the statue as well. This is a depiction of the screens that they talk about when they had other, I wish I could zoom in more. Yeah, there we go. It has a little depiction, can't see it there, like maybe Yasuke is in the bottom right carrying one of the umbrellas, and this is all realistic things that were done back in, I don't know the time they're dating back to. I had a little bit more research. Talk about some of the pictures of the Sengoku Jidai. This is the part where they're attacking the castle. A depiction of Yasuke as far as just regular artists, what they think. And then a picture of Oda Nobunaga as well, as he was depicted. And once again, more of those screens as they had with the black sails, the boat, and everybody traveling on them. And another picture of the depiction of Yasuke, which I think was for the children book. And then just other thoughts of maybe Yasuke and Oda Nobunaga fighting off foes. So it's pretty interesting there. Give me one moment as I pull up. So this is, now I get to do kind of a shameless plug for things that what I've been working on as COVID's been going on. A friend of mine, we had this show called The Wandering Sword Project, where we actually made our own kind of trailer. What we thought Yasuke would have maybe been inspired by, or we were inspired by, and we wanted to show it. So I just want to show you guys that real quick, and then we can get to some questions. Hope you guys are learning and having fun. At least it's entertaining, say the least, I should hope. Yay, good. I'm seeing thumbs up. All right, so let me share screen one again. Let's see, before I start. Let's see. Can you guys hear any music, or is there not any music playing? Okay.
are my African warrior, a Kyojin who will charge with me into combat, an obsidian guardian who safeguards me and my loved ones. This katana represents that you are my samurai.
I am Yasuke. So that was just something that me and my friends put together, and it was really cool. You may not believe that that was actually shot in Illinois, right behind my parents' house with all the bamboo. There's a bamboo forest growing. I'm like, I think I have an opportunity. So it was very interesting. But that's the kind of immersion, and that's the kind of things that helped me create stuff because Yasuke inspired me. So it was very much something that I wanted to show with you guys. And I know we're still good on time. We're about 43 minutes in. But if we wanted to look at some questions, or if you guys had any questions, feel free to ask. But that's pretty much the gist of really the Yasuke the African Samurai. I was looking at some. Oh, someone's like, dope. Or Cyrus says, lots of research. I'm like, yes, it was a lot of research. I still want to learn more. And I'm really glad, once again, to have this opportunity to teach more, because I'd like to make it more academically sound eventually, so I can actually talk a little bit more and get things together. But I mean, for as far as passions or projects of fun, I think it's been okay. I'll let you guys decide that. Lisa Joseph says, if anyone wants to look at more of those Google Namban screens, thank you very much. So they have a lot of Namban, which is also from the traveling wise. One of my friends, Ryokujin the Iron Skies from the East, who's I basically call my rival, is another Namban samurai persona. So we've always, essentially since East and Mid are always bumping heads, especially when we get to Penzik. It's been really fun to get to know him more. Now we're great friends, and it's been a lot of fun time. Someone else, or Lisa Joseph also said that reminded me of another Jesuit chronicle in my to be read pile. Very cool. If there's any other questions, or if you guys have any other things you'd like to, please let me know. You can also reach out to me on Facebook, just Seto Gesshouko. I have a Spencer Waddell thing as well, but I have two separate ones, but I mostly now live on Seto Gesshouko. It says Seto Gesshouko / Spencer Waddell, because I want to switch things over. The little video that we said it has is called the Wandering Sword Project. So if ever, shameless plug, number 2, if you ever want to check that out on YouTube, we talk about medieval things, but we also talk about other nerd cultures, anything to do with swords, or TWSP. So just remember that, Wandering Sword Project. And yeah, thank you so much for having me here. I hope you learned a lot.
Yeah, it looks like Antonio Di Sforza had a question.
Oh, sure. Let me see. Where's that?
I'm not sure. There was a hand raised icon.
Oh, I see.
Indeed, I do. And Your Excellency, if I might ask you a historical perspective question.
Sure.
Why do you believe that it was the Jesuits in particular that were more prominent in terms of, and I'm trying to figure out the best way to word this, but
no, you're fine.
In terms of an order of people that were European bringing somebody of African descent over into Asia, why do you think that it was a religious organization that was primarily doing that as opposed to more
trade?
Sure.
No, I don't think it was only them. I just, from this research that I've looked at time and time again, I think that was the main reason, or the way Yasuke got there. Now, as I briefly said, there were many other times where other Africans, Indians, other people have traveled. Of course, I know everyone wants to say the Silk Road, but it's honestly true. There's way other reasons that could have brought people there. So I don't think it's solely the Jesuits. I don't think it's only them that would have brought someone. I just think that it's likely that it happened this way for Yasuke. But we truly will never know until we get our time machine. We can go back in time and actually see where he was. But does that answer your question a little bit, Antonio?
It definitely does. Thank you so
Cool.
much for answering.
You're very welcome. Pleasure's mine. Good question.
Also, if you don't mind, you had previously
Mhm.
told us or discussed your green symbol on the wall behind you. Can
Oh,
you
yes, we
share
have.
the story with the group?
I would be honored and pleasure to. So as some of you may know, some people would have seen this as the Triforce, or as well, you see Legend of Zelda. It's originally came from the Hojo clan. However, theirs was a blue background with still white triangles. In the SCA, I misregistered this as my device. One, because I do actually love Legend of Zelda, which is great. But I wanted to have it as far as a Japanese culture symbol that was related to me. Now, also within the symbol, it meant dragon scales, or three scales. And being from the Dragon Kingdom or Midrealm, I thought it was fitting. So that's why I chose it. And I just got lucky enough that it was passed from heraldry. Now, I think technically, mumble, it's still a household. They still are Hojo clan members live to this day. So I may not technically supposed to be having it in the SCA, but there we go. Got it passed. It's mine now. But that's what it's about. So. Yeah,
Excellent.
good question.
Oh, good. So everyone on this call promises not to tell. We're
Oh,
good.
that's right. I'd be like, I'd change it, and then I'd be on like a little flap somewhere. I'd be like,
Isn't the recording going up on the web?
That's fine.
No,
It's
he edited it. His
yeah, he'll
excellent-
edit it.
Anyway.
Yeah.
So do you have a particular question?
Sure.
No, I'm just saying about the history. Is there like a particular void in the history that is just driving you nuts that you really, really wish that you could fill in?
I mean, me personally, a lot of us, even though I'm not from the Show Me State, Missouri, I'm right butting up next to it. I want to see it for myself, which was really interesting. And one of the reasons why we made the Wandering Sword project is because the first big project at the end of this video, my friend and myself, Kyle, who's a Sir Cecil in the SCA as well, we're like, we're going to Japan and we're going to follow his footsteps and we're going to do all that. Obviously, that has to be kind of retrocon, and we'll just have to see what happened. Because just now, I think 3 days ago, Japan reclosed their borders again because there is another strain of COVID. So they're not quite sure what's going on. And before they were like, we're going to have the Olympics no matter what in 2021 or 2020. But I think things are going to get changed. Everyone, you have to keep on putting your best foot forward, but you have to meet reality when reality comes, right? That's the most important part. So that part to me in itself, I won't be happy. Knock on wood, hopefully, until I can go step where he was, take researches, take pictures, and actually see. Because later, when I was talking to Thomas Lockley, there was a part where they couldn't find some papers. Because looking for these papers, a lot of things were burned. We talked about the Warring States. So people just wanted to destroy history all the time. They're like, I don't want you to know Nobunaga. Ripped, thrown away, burned. There was a picture that they found, that kid you not. In the back of the picture was tons of letters and envelopes of things that were transcribed of things that were supposed to get to somebody else. So that's like some real life Indiana Jones stuff right there. So there's so many little bits and information. But yeah. I don't know if that answers it. I'm sorry, I kind of tiptoed around it.
No, that's okay. I totally understand. It's one of those, yeah. We were supposed to go to Ireland in July, so we understand.
Totally understand. Totally
Yeah,
understand.
we were gonna go help another barony be born, and yeah, so we feel that pain. Yeah. But yeah, I know that there's, especially in histories where, like you said, they were burning history.
Yeah,
it can be tricky because there will be like a hole in your research, and like, dang it, I should find something. But
exactly. And that's part. And I recently talked about history. That's why I love the SCA. It doesn't just, even though I love the fight, I enjoy the fighting. I came for the fighting, but I stay for the friends. And I want to do more academic research on that. There's a society now that's called HAMA, or Historical African Martial Arts Association, or it's now starting to research, just because there's HEMA, Historical European Martial Arts. Historical African martial arts is now starting to become more of a prevalent thing. It's not necessarily like, you're just like only doing it because it's has to do with myself, but I want to learn the history and I want to understand it. And it's not really there's a lot of people right now. It's the forerunners, the pioneers as it's being done, and a little bit it's yes, just renown. I would like to be one of the people to be known for something to start it, but it's more I just want to know the information. And the best way to know information, if there's nobody to teach you, you got to learn that information so you can teach others or teach yourself. So that's what I'm finding myself now. So even though Yasuke was from Africa and then went to Japan and everything back there, it still will have a root in historical African martial arts that I want to learn more of. So that's another tandem, which hopefully I'll get my minors in historical African studies. So then I can now do it as grants. I'm like, I need to go to Japan to find out where this person Yasuke went. That it's all research. Sign me and give me a grant, please. Give me a grant. But there's all these things. And someone said, Paul was saying, will this recording be available for later? Yes, it will be, except some parts will be edited that I stuck my foot in my mouth. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah. Oh, and Lisa was saying, I hope I get there in 2014. Found the Sunojoy, I can't pronounce that word, temple in Kyoto, and it was a thrill. But yes, there's so many places that I think are just amazing. And even if it's now heaven forbid, a parking lot or something wise, I think I'll be able to just sit there, close my eyes and be like, yeah, I can see it. That's cool. I can see it. Or just go to another castle and be like, that's what it would have looked like there, even though now this one's paved over. So, yeah.
Yeah, yes.
No, you're fine. Saionji. Thank you. That's pronounced it. Saionji. Yeah, I'm horrible with enunciations. Had to practice it beforehand. But yeah, no, I'm glad. I hope people had a good time. Of course, open to any other questions. So, it's funny you start doing a thing and you're like, will I be able to talk for an hour about this? But then of course you start doing it and you're like, oh my gosh, we need to stop him from talking longer.
No. You can go as long as you can.
Oh, no. It'll be fine. No, you guys have other things planned for today.
Well, so I guess another somewhat related, was there something that surprised you as you were doing your research? Was there a particular aspect of the story that you found particularly surprising?
I think actually, when you really think about it, how far Yasuke traveled, and in that time, and not to belittle anyone, because everyone's life is different. There's some people that have never left their own towns, which, I mean, that's what you want. That's awesome. But if you want to travel, there are ways to travel, either through modern means or just slowly saving your ducats, and hopefully a pandemic doesn't come along stopping you from getting there. But you can study and travel all the way, even if it was taken from parts of Mozambique and then all the way gets to Japan. But going through India, learning all these things, it's really pretty cool that someone, where are we at now? 500 years, I won't know. Yeah, almost 500 years, 400 years ago could travel this much, yet sometimes we get this lock in our brain to where we're like, I can't do this, I can't do that. I mean, granted, a lot of times people don't have a choice, but you still have a choice to try to do things you want. So that part of the research was, wow, this person really went from all these places. I better start putting some plans together and trying to do it. So, yeah.
I've got a question. So,
sure.
When he traveled from Africa to Japan, what was his status? Was he a missionary? Was he considered property? I mean, did he go from being a slave to being, a retainer, or was he like a missionary with the other Jesuits?
So from conjecture from the studies that I learned, he started off being more of an object at the beginning, where he was just kind of a child soldier. However, they believe some part when he got to India, he probably was alive long enough and he kind of probably bought back his freedom to where he could have did whatever he wanted. However, you get taught how to kill or do whatever kind of job security, or he probably stayed in it, which is why when Villeneuve found him, was like, well, Villeneuve wasn't stupid. He's like, I want something shock and awe, first of all. I like someone capable, but if people are more worried about my bodyguard instead of me, it'll also give me some kind of commodity when I'm there, because he's really trying to spread religion to this whole other culture. He needs any other kind of bartering pieces he could get. So he then employed Yasuke to where, and then they say that he took places of things. He wasn't actually a Jesuit still, but he would take in the culture. He would do all these things that the Jesuits do. but I believe he was at that time a hired sellsword or a bodyguard. And then thus why, even still under, it's kind of different when we get to that Oda Nobunaga thing, because it makes it seem like he was owned by him, because when he's like, he's now yours, he was still at that point, but you're kind of already under house arrest when you're in such a thing where this person or king or royal is now in charge of you, and this whatever, you kind of got to do whatever they want. It's just lucky enough that hopefully they actually truly became friends. But I think it's kind of things in life. We have such different ideals in our 21st century things where we want our freedom and other things. When freedom is good, but you got to think about how you're going to live your life, what you want to do for food. Why would you go against the stream? If you're having it good, you're getting fed, you got a roof over your shoulders, and you get to talk about things. He probably was like, this is great. But at that point, I think he was a free person, definitely. I think if he wanted to, Nobunaga would have been like, you can go if you want to, but I prefer you not. Yeah, which is true. At that time, it was like, you should stay. But at that point, he had free roam of everything. He wasn't a slave. At that time, he was literally his retainer. He was literally what we'd call, I mean, you understand parts of chivalry, at least for our SCA wise, like you're a champion to the king or the queen at that time. You want to be there, hopefully, and you're trusted. So, yeah.
Sorry. He's just that handsome.
I agree. Like the long hairs, I mean, definitely. So I started doing this whole Mr. T thing now because it's either all bald or just one way, but the long hair, jealous. It looks good on you.
Yeah, he goes for 3 years in between haircuts.
That's awesome. And Lisa's saying, if the Jesuits converted or attempted to convert him, they probably would have tried to educate him. Yeah, they very much would have tried to educate him. And he seemed like an educated person because once again, he wasn't just a kind of, we think about final endgame villains or just a henchman where you're like, I'm just a big guy with muscles and I know what to speak. He was smart. He knew, one, he taught himself his other language. He had to be around other people. I think about the 13th Warrior. With Antonio Banderas when he's just around there, and even though it wouldn't have happened that fast, and slowly he knows how to speak Norse or Viking, as you want to say, and they're like, "How'd you learn that?" And he's like, "I listened." It would have been the same type thing with Yasuke, the immersion, and you want to be smart so you can know more things, so you could better protect your people, and you're going to want to protect your people because they're your paycheck. Some people be like, "That doesn't sound chivalric." I'm like, well. When we really think about chivalry, it was more about you protect the people that are feeding you, because if you can't be fed, you're going to die. So, yeah, you just hope that they're actually the good guys. And you don't have one of those moments where you look at your friend, you're like, are we the bad guys? But no. So,
shackled on a baby? What?
Yeah, you're like, whoa. Maybe we're the bad. I don't know about this. So, I think he was very intelligent. Not just because you're like fanboying the things, like just in order to survive that long and learn the things that he did.
Yeah, and the Jesuits were particularly known for their education. That was one of the things that really set them apart, and eventually caused the Vatican to turn on them. It was because they kept spreading like knowledge and education and stuff, and nobody got
dangerous. Once your peasants start thinking for themselves and they say, whoa, why are you getting 3 pieces of coin when I only get 1? Like, that doesn't add up in math. And they're like,
right.
Well, he had to have been pretty educated because he probably spoke Italian. He probably spoke Portuguese.
Yep. He's probably speak Indian, doing many other different dialects, Japanese at this point. Yeah, I can only imagine. And languages are so hard, like you're saying yourself, being bilingual in Spanish. And my wife is bilingual in Spanish too, and I need to learn more. Every time I'd see her Spanish professors, they're like, do you speak, or they'd say it, of course, in Spanish, like, do you speak Spanish yet? And I'd be like, no habla español. They're like, you need to learn. And it's hard if you don't, especially being an American, English language, it's hard to learn from other things to other things. You have to literally immerse yourself. But at some point, it becomes a crutch. Like we have our phone, which is always attached to us, that Duolingo is really great, that I need to just start doing my Duolingo every single day, and just like we practice our shots in martial arts or anything, just be like, all right, let me do my things and stop having excuses. So
So are you planning to learn Japanese as well?
I would like to a little bit. I'd like to say, just from being a little bit of a nerd and watching anime and other video games and other stuff, I'm like, I already speak a little bit of Japanese, but no, I really couldn't. I couldn't have a conversation other than like Mo Ichido. I know some songs from like Mo Ichido Itakun Desai, which is could not understand you. Please repeat once more. So you can honestly keep on saying it over and over and over again. But
No,
yeah.
I understand. So the one phrase I learned in any language that I'm going to be near is I do not speak this language.
Yeah, no, it's important. When I was over in Germany for a little while, you know, you learn a little bit things are like was ist das? You learn a little bit das Wort, you know, just the basic things. But I've never had a name or
Sprechen
a
Sie English?
Yes, yeah. Sprechen Sie English? Sprechen Sie Deutsch? Like you're like nine.
I learned to order a ham and cheese sandwich in German, so that was at least one thing I could eat.
That is important. That is important. And
I
some
think
part about it.
Thank you.
I think at this point, I'd like to say that we're considering the class over, and if anybody wants to unmute, and we can continue to have a conversation.